Silver, one of the most famous elements on the periodic table, and one of the most coveted naturally occurring resources on the planet, second perhaps only to gold, as humanity's most prized metal. While oftentimes overlooked by its shiny yellow counterpart, silver still has a deeply coveted history and has played a profound role across our civilization. Despite the fact that this metal is quite soft and cannot be forged for weapons, nor can it be used to create beams to prop up our buildings, it is still nonetheless famed for its beauty and its illustrious sheen of shiny gray. It's quite strange that, while technically gray, a color known for being quite dull and boring, can be given a metallic sheen and become one of the most coveted materials on the planet. We don't know for sure why us humans are so fascinated with these shiny metals, but one explanation from evolutionary psychology is that shiny things are beautiful because they look wet. And given the fact that we were once a species of apes rummaging around the savannas of Africa at a time when water was scarce, anything that looked wet probably looked quite beautiful. It's unlikely that hunter-gatherers would have encountered silver that often, given the fact that it's found in the Earth's crust and is usually found in the form of an alloy alongside other metals such as copper and zinc, or in worse cases, lead. But by the time there were more complex societies capable of producing tools to engage in mining, they would have obviously come across silver, in its pure form, or more likely, in deposits alongside other elements. Its rarity would create value in and of itself. Keep in mind that copper is also a beautiful metal, and arguably has a more unique color, but since it's far more common, it did not possess the same degree of scarcity that silver, let alone gold, would, and as a result would not become a luxury commodity. Silver is considered to be one of the metals of antiquity, one of the seven major metals of antiquity, alongside copper, lead, tin, iron, gold, and mercury. Now, obviously, pre modern people were not able to distinguish between certain elements in the air, such as boron or oxygen, but they could definitely come across various types of metals that they were mining. Given its limited use on a functional level, silver was by and large used to display status and symbology. This is in contrast to, say, copper and tin, which were used to make bronze, which was incredibly functional during the Bronze Age, then replaced by iron. Iron can be turned into steel by creating an alloy of iron using magnesium and carbon. Silver was mostly used for ornamental purposes and for currency. Keep in mind that silver's smoke point is at 961 degrees Celsius, or 1763 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes it hard to work with than, say, tin, which has a lower smoke point, but slightly easier to work with than gold, and certainly easier than iron, which has a far higher smoke point. The ability to wield fire at higher and higher temperatures was essential for technological development. As humans moved into the Bronze Age, primarily in the eastern Mediterranean, silver would be used for coinage first, as the Lydians and what is now Turkey would use it to, well, produce currency, along with other items that could be traded, far more effectively than barter. Due to silver's soft nature, it could not be used for weapons in the same way that copper was when combined with tin to produce bronze, and given the fact that it was pretty rare, it became a source of status, which made it the perfect currency. The ancient Phoenicians, native to what is now Lebanon, would set up colonies across the Mediterranean, oftentimes in search of silver, primarily in the Iberian Peninsula. The Greeks would later take note of the Phoenician love for silver and use it in their own coins. Eventually, the Romans, who were quite fond of ripping off the Greeks, would in turn be fond of ripping off the Phoenicians indirectly, and took on the love of silver as well, using them for coins, and extracting as much silver as they could from what is now Spain and Portugal in the Iberian Peninsula. However, when the Western Roman Empire collapsed, so did the silver trade in much of Western Europe. Silver was seen as a symbol of the centralization and power of the Roman elite, and without the Roman elite to rule over much of Western Europe, the silver trade declined. That was until the Carolingian Empire emerged in what is now France and Germany to fill up the power vacuum. However, on the other side of the Atlantic would lie vast sums of silver that would put much of Europe to shame. This was predominantly in South America. During the Middle Ages, the most powerful empire in South America were the Incans, stretching from what is now Colombia to what is now Chile, primarily based in what is now Peru. The Incans had been very isolated. They didn't have their own official form of currency. The unit of value in the Incan Empire was labor. It essentially operated as a sort of proto-communist economy, but unlike those of the 20th century, it actually functioned pretty damn well. However, oftentimes this meant that there was a system of enforced labor since labor was a unit of value. Silver was extracted by the Incans, however, they didn't use it for coinage or currency. They believed it was the tears of the moon, or perhaps the moon goddess. In an unusual occurrence or coincidence in history, Spain, the country most well known for the production of silver before Columbian contact, would eventually rise to become an empire in its own right. They would make contact with the Americas and conquer the Incans. The last Incan emperor was kidnapped by the Spanish, and the Spanish promised to free him in return for filling up a room filled with gold and silver, which the Incans obliged, only for the Spanish to take all the gold and silver and then kill him anyway. The Spanish Empire would take up much of the South American continent, and it would be the city of Potosi in what is now Bolivia that would become one of the richest cities in the world due to its abundance of silver. A giant mountain filled with silver. I've actually been to the mines of Potosi themselves. They're quite remarkable. Oh, and a fun fact, they actually kind of worship this god creature called El Tío, also known as the Uncle. It's actually the miners who worship him, give him tobacco, alcohol, and llamas in return for making sure that they're safe. Or more accurately, that El Tío doesn't kill you in a mining accident. Putting that anecdote aside, the Spanish would spread their influence throughout much of South America, and eventually take over the southern cone. Much of the silver mined in Bolivia would eventually go down to the Rio de la Plata, or the River of Silver, on their way to the port of Buenos Aires. The nation of Argentina traces its name to Argentum, which means silver. The Spanish would produce so much silver in these mines, or more accurately, the indigenous peoples there who were forced to mine these mines produced so much silver that the Spanish became immensely wealthy. So wealthy to the point that it actually produced hyperinflation. The value of silver plummeted for a period of time, and the Spanish Empire actually became less wealthy. This would set up the stage for the gradual transition out of the silver and gold standard, as our understanding of economics changed into more abstract concepts of wealth. Our wealth was no longer viewed purely in the sense of shiny metals we could dig up from the earth, but rather the amount of value a society places on a particular commodity. Silver's use didn't just evaporate. While it's true that many countries did indeed abandon the silver standard and later the gold standard, many countries still produce silver in large amounts, particularly in Latin America. However, today, it's not simply an ornamental role that silver plays. Yes, it's used for fancy jewelry, and it's also used for many other applications that people of antiquity could not have ever dreamed of. For example, medical devices oftentimes use silver due to its antimicrobial properties, albeit in a very limited fashion. After all, it is very expensive. Copper, after all, is cheaper and more abundant and also has antimicrobial properties. Silver is also sometimes used in electronic devices, but again, due to its high cost and lower abundance, copper is usually the preferred method of using electronic wiring. There are also some small traces of silver in solar panels and conductors. In many cases, people using these devices are probably unaware that silver even resides in them, given how small the amounts are. But nonetheless, this shiny, beautiful metal has been woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. Well, maybe not every day, but our monthly lives, how about that? Yes, it will always take second place to gold, including at sports tournaments, but silver can take solace in the fact that at least it isn't lead, the next metal in this video series.